Welcome. I'm really glad you're here. I want to invite you to slow down with me for a moment. This episode isn't meant to be rushed. It's not background noise. It's a conversation, the kind you sit with. This episode is the foundation of everything I share on this channel, on my blog, and through Mommy and Me Travel in Luxury. And today, I want to talk about why I chose luxury travel while homeschooling my daughter and what luxury actually means to me as a mother. Because when people hear the phrase luxury travel, it often brings up images of excess, status, private jets, and a lifestyle that feels distant or unrealistic. That has never been what this space is about. For me, luxury has always meant comfort, ease, and support. Support for motherhood, support for learning, and support for emotional presence. And I want to say this clearly from the beginning. This is not about bragging. It's not about comparison. And it's not about pretending this life is effortless. It's about sharing what's possible thoughtfully, honestly, and with gratitude. First, let's talk a little bit more about luxury. Luxury, as I use it here, is relative. It is not a fixed price point. It is not excess. And it is not performance. Luxury is what reduces friction in your life. Let me ask you something, and you don't need to answer out loud. When you travel, what actually drains you the most? Is it the packing, the rushing, the noise, the complaining, maybe, from your children, or the constant transitions? Luxury is what removes those points of friction. For one family, luxury might mean a larger hotel room so everyone sleeps well. For another, it might mean fewer activities and more rest. Sometimes luxury is predictability, and sometimes it's flexibility. I always want to acknowledge something openly because it matters. We are deeply blessed to have had the opportunities that we've had, and I don't take that lightly. Gratitude grounds this entire conversation. Luxury for me became about designing experiences that support regulation, connection, and learning, not about how something looks online. Let's go back in time for a little bit. Before motherhood and alongside it, I worked as both a consultant and a project manager. And that matters because it shapes how I think. As a consultant, you're trained to look at systems, constraints, trade offs, and risks. As a project manager, you're trained to plan intentionally with scope, timeline, resources, risk again, and sustainability. I approach travel the same way. Every trip is a project, not in a rigid way, but in a thoughtful one. I research deeply, I think about flow, and I think about energy, not just logistics. I ask questions like, where will we feel most supported? Where will transitions be easiest? Where can learning happen naturally? And where can rest happen without guilt? Luxury stopped being indulgence and became intentional design. Before becoming a mother, I traveled very differently, as I'm sure many of you have as well. I moved quickly. I optimized itineraries, and I treated exhaustion like part of the experience. Motherhood stripped that illusion away. When you travel with a child, you see immediately how pace affects regulation. You see how noise affects patience, how rushing affects connection, and how exhaustion shuts curiosity down. I noticed that the more supported I felt, the more present I became. And the more present I became, the better my daughter regulated. Travel stopped being about how much we could see and became about how it felt to move through the world together. Homeschooling wasn't a rigid decision for us. It emerged naturally from how we were already living. When learning is woven into daily life, conversations, experiences, and observations, it stops feeling separate from living. Language has always been especially important to us. Wherever we travel, we learn phrases, greetings, and simple conversational language. Not necessarily to be fluent, but to be respectful, curious, and connected. My daughter is bilingual, and homeschooling allows her to be taught and to think in both languages. And I think that matters because language shapes worldview and it also shapes identity. Travel also gave her something deeper, and that's the ability to understand who she is outside of what society assumes she should be. She sees many ways of living, many definitions of success, and many ways of existing in the world. Homeschooling gives us the space to explore that fully, and it gives every homeschool family the same opportunity. The real shift towards slower, more intentional travel happened during a month-long journey through Kenya and Tanzania. And honestly, Kenya was where everything changed. At the Bomas of Kenya, my daughter experienced culture through music, dance, and storytelling. This wasn't entertainment, it was education, as she had the opportunity to learn about the various tribes and ethnic groups in Kenya. She learned that culture is carried through people, not textbooks. At Giraffe Manor, feeding giraffes became a lesson in gentleness, awareness, and respect. And for me, it became a lesson on how to conquer fear that I actually had to feed a giraffe alongside with her. At the elephant orphanage, learning happened through observation, understanding conservation, care, and responsibility. And it also didn't hurt that the elephants were absolutely adorable. Luxury also showed up in how we chose our experiences. For example, when we were in Tanzania, we opted for semi-private safari drives. Instead of being rushed in a large group, our guide could slow down. He told stories, explained animal behavior, and talked about ecosystems and migration patterns. And my daughter absolutely loved it because she was free to ask questions, real questions, unrushed questions. Why do they move that way? Where are they going? How does he know where to look? Those conversations stayed with her because they were personal. And to me, that was luxury. Not exclusivity, but depth. In Tanzania, the pace slowed even further. Daily safari drives weren't spectacles, they became rhythm. We witnessed the beginning of the Great Migration. there's a blog coming where I'll share those experiences in more detail, but they deserve the space for such detail because it was an amazing experience. We stayed in a lodge long enough to feel like family. When you stay longer, people stop treating you like tourists or guests and they start treating you like family. They know what you like to eat. They know what your preferences are as it relates to drinks. They ask you, how was your day? You have real conversations and you get to know about their families and their likes. There was warmth, friendliness, and a genuine appreciation that we valued their culture. Luxury also showed up in where we stayed. We did choose a suite, and that meant after long, stimulating days, we all had room to decompress. My daughter had space to rest and read and process. I had space to sit, reflect, and get work done when needed. That balance mattered because, as you know, motherhood doesn't pause life, it lives inside of it. After Kenya and the Serengeti, we transitioned to a beachfront villa in Zanzibar, which is also part of Tanzania. This was integration because swimming became a daily practice, nature became the classroom, and bonding became effortless. To me, this was also luxury in its truest form. Not extravagance, but space, ease, and comfort. One of the least talked about aspects of luxury travel, especially for mothers, is emotional safety. When logistics are smooth, when environments are supportive, and when expectations are realistic, everyone regulates better. That may mean fewer meltdowns, more patience, more curiosity, and the part that we might like the most, more learning. Luxury in this sense becomes an act of care, not indulgence. This channel exists to explore motherhood, travel, and homeschooling through that lens. Not perfection, not performance, and not pressure. Here we talk about traveling intentionally with children, redefining luxury on your own terms, learning through lived experiences, and choosing fewer things sometimes if it means that it's done more meaningfully. Some episodes will be reflective, some will be practical, and all will be grounded in real life. I share this to motivate and inspire other mothers, not to impress, but to encourage. With thoughtful planning, intention, and flexibility, many homeschool mothers can create versions of this life and versions that are realities for them. Not identical versions, not perfect versions, but meaningful ones. This isn't about copying paths. It's about expanding what feels possible. If this way of thinking resonates with you, I've written more about my story and philosophy on my blog at mommyandmetravelandluxury.com. This episode, though, builds directly on what I share there, and future episodes will often connect back to those reflections in writing. Thank you for being here, for choosing a slower, more intentional conversation. Wherever you're listening from, I hope this episode gives you permission to define luxury, learning, and motherhood in a way that truly supports you. Bye for now.